Shalom, my friends. Pretty interesting. I've had a number of people contacting me this week with the same question. And that being, what about forsaking the fellowship of the saints? I'm not even sure which version they get that particular quote from, but that and also what church do you go to, or what do you think of churches in general? Well, and it reminded me, one day I was in a store and wound up having a conversation with a woman, and she asked me, she says, what church do you go to? And I said, you're looking at it. You know, the word church, boy, I really don't like that word anymore at all, because it's such a, it adds so much confusion to people's hearts. It's amazing. I mean, when you think of the word church, of course you think of this building on the corner where people go to worship various religions. And in most English versions where you see the word church, it's usually interpreted from the Greek ecclesia, which literally means called out ones. It doesn't mean a building, it doesn't mean a particular faith, it doesn't mean a particular religion. It's referring to those whom the Father has called out of the world and has chosen as a gift for His one and only unique Son, Yeshua. So, what church do you go to? It's like saying, what called out ones do you go to, you know? And I said, she said, what church do you go to? And I said, you're looking at it. This is the church I go to. This is the body where I worship. And she asked me that same question, following that. What about not forsaking the fellowship of the saints, she said. Everyone has, they quote the same phrase. And I says, well, what do you think I'm doing right now? I'm not forsaking the fellowship of believers. You're a believer, and, you came up to me, and we started talking, and I am not forsaking our fellowship. So, I think that little story kind of paints the picture. What church do you go to? This is the church I go to. This is the temple where I worship the Father, His Son, and His indwelling Ruach HaKodesh. Let me just say up front, I don't like churches and I don't like religions. At this point, I have come to believe that all religions are false. All religions are wicked. All churches are false and wicked. Now, please understand, I don't mean to say that going to church is a bad thing. Going to church can be a very good thing if your heart is right and your understanding is clear and you're not worshiping the doctrine of a particular religion. But religions and churches can be very detrimental because they tend to worship the world. They are a 501c3 corporation, and, they create this structure, and, they tend, when everybody says to me, what about not forsaking the fellowship of the saints. They've usually been indoctrinated with this doctrine from a church that's teaching them, oh, don't forsake the fellowship of coming to our church and giving us your tithes. I have another video about tithing. If you haven't seen that, check it out. But let's read the word. That phrase comes from Ivrim, Hebrews, chapter 10, verse 25, but I'll read 24 and 25. In the HalleluYah Scriptures it reads, "And let us be concerned for one another in order to stir up love and good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging, and so much more as you see the day," capital D, coming near. So, the key word here, is forsaking. It says, not to forsake the assembling of believers, as some have been doing, at that time that was written. Now, most English translations come from the Greek word concerning the word forsake or forsaking. Enkatalipo is the Greek that's being interpreted as forsake. It means to leave helpless, to totally abandon, to utterly forsake or desert someone. So what the word is saying, let us not leave believers helpless. Let us not totally abandon others, believers, from assembling. The churches, turn that into you have to come to church every Sunday. Otherwise you're forsaking the fellowship of believers. And that's not what the word is saying. The word is saying, do not, let me look at it again. Chapter 10, verse 25 in Hebrews. Do not utterly abandon or leave helpless the assembling of ourselves together. So, it's saying, don't forsake the assembling of believers. It doesn't say create a 501c3 corporation and enforce the assembly at a particular day and time that is to be repeated, in an enforced way. No, and it's not saying go out and grab people up and look for assembling. It's just saying that, when you come across another believer, or when you have an opportunity to assemble with another believer or other believers, or when other believers have the opportunity to spend time with you, do not abandon that. So, like that woman asked me, what church do you go to? I said, you're looking at it. And she says, what about not forsaking the gathering of the believers, So immediately she thought that because I don't go to a church, I'm forsaking the fellowship of believers. You see the indoctrination that I'm talking about? And she says, what about forsaking the fellowship of believers? I said, what do you think we're doing right now? Am I forsaking our assembly? No. So, I don't know, don't get caught up in thinking that if you don't belong to a church and go to church every Sunday, that you are forsaking the fellowship of the saints. Don't believe that, because that's not what the word is saying. Rather, keep your eyes open when someone comes up to you and you know they're a believer and they want to talk to you about the Word. Embrace that. Don't forsake that. It's that kind of thing. Now, as far as, do I go to a church? What do I think of churches? What do I think of religion? I have gone to many churches over the many years of my life, and I've looked at them. There's a time or two that I got more involved with a particular church than usual because I saw something of the Ruach and got excited. But I have never seen a church that doesn't worship the world more than it does Elohim. Ever. It always comes down, even if I maybe was involved with the church for a while that didn't seem to be doing that. After a period of time, it collapsed, it fell apart, and it wound up falling into that category. So, personally, I don't believe in going to church. I believe in going to the Word. I believe in spending time with the Father. Not on Sundays. Every day. The first thing I do when I wake up. The one thing I do all day while I am awake. The last thing I do before my head hits the pillow is to have conversation with the Father through His beloved Son, His Bane, Yeshua. Church, forget church. Church really means the called out ones. So I don't go to the called out ones, although I'm doing that right now on YouTube. I'm going to the called out ones. But no, I am a called out one, so I don't go to me. If I wanted to think of church, as a place where you go to worship Elohim, I do that wherever I am. Whether I'm here at home, or if I'm out driving around, visiting other people, no matter where I am, that place, wherever I am, is a place where I seek and worship Elohim. Always. There's no singular place. It's, wherever I happen to be. And then churches, I don't like them because it's religion. It's the doctrine of men, or doctrines of men going on. Even if it's, one church, you go to another church, they both have the same name, they still have different doctrines, and they're all trying to follow a set of doctrines that makes them right, that they think makes them right with the Father, without looking into what He says makes them right with Him. No, I would say forget about churches and religions. If you have a church that you go to and you like it, great, wonderful. I'm not saying stop. But I would say take a look. Is it detrimental to your personal time with the Father? Do you spend more time with that church than you spend with Him? If you're doing that, if you're spending more time going to church or church functions than you do quietly alone with conversation with the Father, then it is detrimental to your walk with Him. No question about it. Or if you spend more time going to church or church functions than you do reading His Word, same thing. It's detrimental. And if you're, believing in doctrines, don't forsake the fellowship of the saints. Where does it say that? I don't see that, quote unquote, in the NIV. I don't see it in the King James, and certainly don't see it in the HalleluYah Scriptures. I don't know, where's that coming from? But everybody quotes the same phrase. They're not getting it from the book, my friends. So they're getting it from some doctrine that's been drilled in to so many people. Yeah, I thought it would be the King James, because everybody, the King James has been the version, English version, that everybody has been indoctrinated with, And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's just, for decades, whether it's my generation or my daughter's generation or my parents' generation, maybe not my daughter's, but my generation, my parents' generation, and my grandparents' generation, King James was the thing, But that's not where it comes from. King James doesn't say, "Don't forsake the fellowship of the saints," quote unquote. I don't know, but everybody seems to have that quote going on. What about that? Well, that does not mean make sure you go to church. No, that's not what it means. It means make sure that you don't abandon any believers at any time from fellowshipping with you. Period. So that's it. What do I think about forsaking the fellowship? Yeah, and what do I think about going to church? I think I've answered it. I don't go to a church. Every time I do, it's very disappointing. Very disappointing. They worship the world. They worship social gatherings, and they don't worship Him. They don't know His Word, and they don't spend so much time in His Word as they do, serving coffee and cupcakes or whatever, gathering tithes. So that's it on that one, my friends. Thank you, my beloved friends, for your wonderful support. I really appreciate your diligence and your faithfulness. Shalom.